Hello, everyone, and welcome to this free Friday webinar series. We will have a short webinar today, only 30 minutes, so you have to stay focused and sharp. We do caption this webinar automatically, so please use the CC function in Zoom if you would like the captions to be shown. And if you would like to ask questions to today's speaker, then please use the Q&A functionality. This webinar is recorded and will be published on our website afterwards. We have more than 200 registered today, so quite a lot of people going on. So if your question has not been responded to, I apologize on beforehand. We will not have time probably for all the questions, but do ask questions anyway. My name is Susanna Lorin. I'm the Managing Director and Chair of the Funka Foundation. And today it is my great pleasure to welcome our research strategist, Sarah Kjellstrand, who will present to you on a very important and interesting topic. Go ahead, Sarah. You are muted.
See that now? Yeah. Today's topic is accessibility supported, and I need to speak slowly because I know that there are lots of access and S's in all these long words, so it's easy to stumble on them. But what is accessibility supported all about? It's actually the use of tools like assistive technology, but also built-in accessibility features on top of accessible interfaces. So what web accessibility in standards do is that they have a basic hygienic factors check that all the websites and interfaces are accessible to as many people as possible. But then you also have the personal needs and the personal preferences. And for these, people can use either assistive technology or built-in accessibility features, or both of them, or either. So that is, in fact, accessibility supported. It's support to the users on top of general accessibility. So in particular, I'm going to talk about built-in accessibility features. And so what are these? These are features that are built in your mainstream software. It could be in the browser, it could be in the word processing program, or in any other software, in your mobile phone, for example, also. And these are not replacing assistive technology, but it's really tools for a much broader user group that do not have access to assistive technology, or may not even realize that they need different types of tools, or that it could be useful to have some support in accessibility. So the advantage of these built-in features is that there is a lot of them, and they support a personalization of settings, so that each and every one of us can have our personal setup of different accessibility features that we use. And there are loads of these. I'm not going to get into too much detail on the different categories, but there is, for example, magnifying features, there's voiceover, word completion, word prediction, speech recognition, captions, switch controls, and this is just a very small sample of everything that is available on the market. So if we now have both web accessibility and standards working on the interfaces for general accessibility, and then the users can, for extra support, also get help from assistive technology or from built-in features, then the accessibility problem is solved, right? Well, in practice, it's not that easy, in fact. So all these accessibility supported tools that are available that get close to an accessible experience for the user, but not really close enough in practice, as it turns out. So what we have been looking at in a study for a paper on assistive technology and built-in accessibility features is that there is several problems that actually hinders the accessible experience, since the users do not really have the full potential to use all of the features that are there in practice in the day-to-day lives. So the first of these problems is that there is a lot of tools available, but they're not actually used in practice. And there could be issues of people having difficult to find them, difficult to use them, or difficult to access them. There is also an issue about updates that makes it confusing and difficult for the users to actually keep up with the updates, and they forget or do not have access to things that they used to before. And then there is also a general lack of training and support for users. So I'm going to get into these a bit more detail in the next few slides. Regarding the availability, it's really common that users are in fact unaware of the support that they can get. In one of the studies we looked at in the literature review for this paper, it said that only 15% of the people they asked about 100 users on how they could find, or did they know there was support on their phones. And in fact, only 50% knew that there was some support they could get, and only 12% could actually show correctly how they use the support. So there's a lot of untapped potential in getting actually these built-in features out to the users, that the awareness of them is spread. And then for people who know it and who know it on one platform, perhaps they have difficulty to use it on another platform or another device or in different software, because there's an issue of placements of these features and the controls not being standardized. And also that goes to the same kind of issue, is that people in general do not, like perhaps in the olden days, have their only one and only desktop device that they use to access the internet. I mean, this is not what's happening now. People have different devices, different platforms, and you also use other people's devices and platforms, especially if you go to do an errand, or if you have different things at work, for example, or you just go to a library to look things up. And then you don't have your own environment of settings that you have carefully set up at home for your preferred device. So you lose the accessibility supported when you move to other devices and other environments. Another issue is with the updates and changes. And for the sake of this research, I looked at how many updates there were in one of the most used word processing software. And I thought in the beginning that it could be about 6 or 7 updates per year or something like that, just based on intuition, based on how many things I feel, how many times I feel that I get this notification of updates. And in fact, when I looked at it, it was more than 20 updates in just 9 months. So 3/4 of a year, 20 updates. Of course, not all of these will have an impact on accessibility, but who knows? I mean, there is generally a lack of information of what not only what the update is about, but also how it impacts the setup of assistive technology and the setups of these built-in accessibility features. So for people who use assistive technology, it could be a really problem with the updates, both on the AT and also in the mainstream software that is used. And the third area of gaps that we looked at is about training. And this is a general problem in the accessibility world and support for users. There is a lack of availability of training, perhaps especially for built-in accessibility features. Usually people who get an assistive technology prescribed to them get some sort of training or support in the beginning. But then comes the next question, and it's about the timing. Usually you get the training when you first access the AT for the first time. But then perhaps you forget, and there are changes with all the updates. There may be a need to learn new things or to relearn how to properly use the AT or the built-in accessibility features. So there's a need for continuous training and support. And also what we've seen in some of the projects that we have been involved in before is that usually people want to practice at their own pace and also to be able to repeat. And if you go to a standardized training course, then you have this couple of days of that training period dedicated to it, and then good, you get the diploma, everything's fine, and you set out in the reality. Perhaps then you start to realize actually how I'm going to do this in practice. And then you're on your own. So there's a need for some sort of training that you can go back to and practice at your own pace. So the slightly depressing outcome of the research we did was that, well, the accessibility in practice for the user at any point of time is really about the outcome. It's not the intent. So that is, it doesn't really matter how many built-in accessibility features there are. If people cannot use them for one reason or another, then accessibility in practice is not achieved in any case. So definitely more work needed on a lot of different fronts, on support to users in finding and using the built-in features, on continuous support and training, and also on mainstreaming, or should I rather say standardizing solutions, so that people can find the accessibility features and use them in the way they expect in different platforms without having to relearn all the different solutions that may exist. So just to end this short talk, we have a few tips for closing the gaps. And one of the things is to use consistent design so that people are not having to look for things where they don't usually are expecting to find them. To make built-in features easier to find. I was thinking about that when I got a new phone recently, that you get this sort of walkthrough when you get the phone, which is really nice, but it's mostly about security and fancy stuff. So new, interesting features that the developers thinks you will think are cool to use, but you rarely get to walk through about accessibility features. And it's also the same with updates and what has changed, that it should be a notification, not only that there's been an update, but also about what has actually changed in terms of accessibility. And the same thing is true there. If you have like a conference tool, usually you get these pop-ups on new cool features that they changed, like how you can make balloons or fireworks appear on the screen with hand gestures. But it's seldom that you actually get a pop-up or some sort of notification of new accessibility features. And I don't think it's because the features are not there. I mean, they're working on it. It's just that they're not really making people aware of it to the same extent. And then also, there is a need to provide guidance in the broad sense, so training and also continuous support. So I think that is what I had to share for the moment. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It's a long report and a lot of research behind it, and you managed to cover or make a little overview in just 15 minutes, so that's impressive. I will now post the link to the smart guide that we provide with our Friday webinars. So you can go to our website and find a smart guide, which has some of the tips and tricks that Sarah spoke about. So we have got a couple of questions here. So how do we get software providers to aim for consistent design and make features easier to find? That's not the easiest question maybe, but I'm sure you have some kind of idea on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's work in the long term. And what would be good is if there was some sort of competition here so that people actually went together, not against each other, but competition in the good sense, that they want to have them more and more features that are useful for everyone, and that would be looking at each other's solutions and coming to common suggestions. Another way to do it more forcefully is, of course, standardization, then even more forcefully legislation. But hopefully, now with everything happening in the tech world, the developers would also be interested in getting as wide audience as possible, and would be looking at this from the voluntary side.
Yeah, and sometimes the market do kind of align when somebody finds something really clever, and that just magically happens that everyone is doing the same thing. So it may be organized by itself, or maybe policymakers would need to support it. So another question we have had here is, what countries are the research you mentioned based on?
So we did mainly a literature study. So we haven't looked at specific countries, but really where the most interesting studies came from. So it's worldwide. Some are European, but some are also US based, and even Australian. I think there is a lot of different sources.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And we also got a question on what the large tech companies can do to solve this, but I think you already mentioned it in the slides, and it's also in the smart guide, so I don't think we need to dig deeper into that. So another question is, will any of this be solved with AI?
The big
question
question.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, I don't know, now I'm just thinking freely here, but in my mind, AI is also one of these solutions that are being developed on the tech side. And what we see in other types of research is that people with disabilities and the users are not really involved in developing the solutions. They may get to test it at one point, but as long as there is no real integration of the real needs and how people actually interact with things in reality, I think it's a big chance that AI solutions would also have the same issue. That is, somebody has thought of a brilliant solution that works in theory, but then in practice, there may still be a gap between how users actually use the AI and what the developers thought. So there is really, I mean, I cannot really emphasize enough the need for people with disabilities to be involved in research, people without disabilities, real users. And I think there's really a lack of this.
Yeah, and even if it's kind of AI based, I still need to find it, at least until the AI is kind of inside of our brains, or know what I want to do before I know it myself. So I think that there's still a bit of a gap there. Even if the solutions become smarter, it's still this knowledge and awareness and findability, I think would still be the same, at least in my thinking.
Yes, and also the categorization of different solutions. So there has been other research done on that, what you feed. I mean, an AI is only as smart as the people who feed it in. Okay, they can get smarter, but you still have to think a lot about what data you are using from the beginning. And I recently saw an article on AI solving accessibility forever. And then there was like 3 or 4 pages on the solution. And then the authors themselves had put another 10 pages or something like that on all the different other factors that they are aware of. And one of them was really that the AI is based on a categorization of needs, and it still cannot really be as subtle as the real cases. So it's difficult to capture all the diversity that people are used to.
Yeah, very true. So one question here is, how important do you consider the tests and report from the users of accessibility features driven to developers' teams?
Not really sure I understood how
important do you consider the tests and reports from the users of accessibility features? So I guess the user satisfaction or things like that. That's how I interpret it, and how to drive that into the developers' teams.
I mean, it's really important, but how to drive it? I mean, what we always recommend is user-centered design, so that you don't really rely on the reports afterwards, after you have developed it, but that you really speak to the users right from the beginning when you start designing the tools. So user reports are always useful, but for continuous improvement on something that you have already designed together with users from the start. So that's what I would say, is to think about user involvement already at the start of the design.
Or even when getting the idea of creating this new thing, maybe nobody needs it really. So where's the best place to go to learn what the standard design of various components is, so I can make sure I'm applying the consistent design, quote unquote, you suggest? That's a
I think it's more for
billion-dollar
you,
question.
that question. It's standardization question. It's more your area, I think.
Yeah, so we don't have standardized. I think one of the problems here is that there is no standardized way of doing this. I mean, most of us know that in most websites we find the logo up top left and so on. Nobody made a standard on that, and there's no law saying that it should be like that, but it just became kind of a de facto standard. But I think what this research paper is really describing is that because there is no real standardized ways of providing all of these built-in features, it's really, really hard for the users to find them. So I think what Sarah mentioned, that the market should kind of come together and agree, is one way, or maybe the standardization bodies. I'm not sure the standardization organizations are the right place for such a thing, but I think the problem is that there is no best place to find that right now, and we'll just hopefully have a place to point you in the future. Another question here is, what should I, as a UX designer, focus my energy on to make some real change?
It's really broad, because UX you can do so many things in different areas. So I guess it depends on what you are working on. But again, I'm really advocating for getting to talk to real users and not just relying on personas and research, but really talk to the users from the start in everything you do.
And I think maybe kind of the way forward, if you add new features, try to see is it a way to logically group them somehow? Because sometimes we see that in software, for example, there is some kind of logic to how things are grouped, but then the accessibility things, they're like added on somewhere and they don't really fit in. So I think for just as a kind of a thought on how does this fit in, where in the workflow do I need this feature, or what could I do just before or after or something, try to make some kind of production logic or process logic, I think would maybe help, if that is possible at all, to get that into the functionality or the interface. I think that could be useful, at least in some cases. So it seems like you have responded to everything. Everything was crystal clear. So the questions, we didn't run out of time for the questions. So that's really good. So let's see if we can just do the little bit of wrap up that we planned. So we have the next Friday webinar in the series is on the 28th of June. So not next week, but in 2 weeks. And then our colleague, Malin Hammarberg, who is a senior UX designer and accessibility specialist, will talk about accessibility in social media. So it's the same time, 1:30 in the afternoon on the Friday. It's free of charge, and we will also publish a short smart guide to go with it. And also, when we do these webinars in English and have smart guides in English, the smart guide is also presented in Swedish. I don't have the link, unfortunately, but if you go to our website and just switch language to Swedish, you will find the lovely word of lathund, which is what our smart guides are called in Swedish. So don't miss out on the on the webinar that Malin is carrying out, and I will post the link to that so that you'll find it also. And already next week, we have a webinar, a final event. Sorry for this super ugly slide, but we have a final event in a large research project that we have been carrying out called Intax. That's on user testing with persons with disabilities. So it's kind of a little bit connected to what Sarah was talking about. And this is a free webinar as well, and it's already on the 13th, so that's on the Thursday afternoon. It's a 2-hour webinar together with the partners, university partners and end user organizational partners from across Europe. So if you're interested in user testing with persons with disabilities, we will present the results of the of that project and also have panels with end users and with the potential employers, because this project is about making sure that students of UX and graphical design and other web professionals, kind of the next generation of web professionals, get to know about user testing with people with disabilities to achieve accessibility in the workforce. So it's a way to connecting the dots and making sure they are also, they know about this when they get out into the work labor market. So that's what we have before the summer. And if you have any questions, then you're, as always, very welcome to reach out to us, either to Sarah, and the email is sarah.källstrand, KJELLSTRAND @funkafoundation.org. You can also just use the info@funkafoundation.org if you want to reach out to us, and you go to the whole team at once. So with that, I think we are finished for today. Thank you very much for joining us, and do enjoy the rest of the Friday afternoon and the weekend, and hopefully a little bit of sunshine as well. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.